Good morning, and thank you so much for joining today to discuss the Rural Scale Up Grant Program, a program through the Center for Rural Revitalization at Iowa Economic Development Authority. Just a reminder, this webinar will be recorded and we will have an opportunity for questions at the end. So today we will be discussing the current timeline of the grant program, an overview of the program, the scoring rubric and application questions, and then finally we will have that opportunity at the end for questions. If you have any technical difficulties or questions as we're going, please use the chat feature. At the end, we will be able to unmute and you can ask your question live. So first, the application is currently available and open. It is on iowagrants.gov. And the application deadline is September 1st, 11:59 p.m. And the funding decision notification will be by the end of the month. The applications are all reviewed by a panel of task force members from the Empower Rural Iowa task forces, as well as staff and experts in the area. The funding period then begins immediately on October 1st and goes through June 30th of 2024. So part of the reason, if you're familiar with the Center for Rural Revitalization grants, that we have kind of changed and shifted our funding period timeline is to add as much time as possible once we have that funding allocation from the legislature to make sure that there is ample time to get those projects done. So this is a brand new program this year, and the goal of the Rural Scale Up Grant Program is to support the replication and spread of those creative solutions that are addressing current issues and challenges faced by rural communities. So this developed kind of after looking at the success of the Rural Innovation Grant Program, which has been around for a few years now, I believe 3 years now. And the success of those really truly innovative solutions. And we wanted to have a kind of partner program that could assist other communities who wanted to then implement that success. So that is the reason why this program was developed. It was so that others could see what is working really well, do their due diligence, if you will, do their homework on those programs and how they might work well within their communities, and then implement them. The minimum grant request for the Scale Up Grant Program is $5,000. The maximum is $20,000. And the match requirement is a 1-to-1.5 secured cash match. So that means the cash must be available at the time of application. And what that means as far as the 1-to-1.5 match, if you are requesting the full $20,000, you need $10,000 in cash match. Comparatively, if you're asking for the minimum, the $5,000, you need $2,500 cash match. So kind of all the project that is $20,000 must be at least a $30,000 project. It can be more than that with more match, but that is the requirement. As a reminder, the expenses must all be incurred within the funding period to be eligible. That includes match and the grant expenses. So anything that is outside of that, we would be interested in to know the total cost of the full project, but it would not be able to count towards match or the actual grant costs. This program is on a reimbursement basis. So it doesn't have to be one lump sum, but disbursements are made in an amount of at least $1,000 per request, and that is through Iowa Grants. So what that means is your claim amount must actually be a minimum of $1,500. 500 of that would be your match. 1,000 of that would be the claim request. When you submit, you need to include an invoice, proof of payment, and status report. Proof of payment can be a wide variety of things. It could be a receipt. It could be acknowledgement of payment. We're fairly flexible, but there must be some kind of indication that that was actually paid. There are reporting requirements for this program as well as there are for all of our grant programs through the Center for Rural Revitalization. Quarterly reports, the first one for this program will be in January of 2023, and that will capture the period from October to December of 2022. So kind of those first 3 months. And then after that, you will have another quarterly report in April that will cover January through March, then July, that will cover April through June, and finally October, July through September, and then we'll continue forward. There's also a final report that must be completed within 120 days of the project completion date. And that is a more robust report. You need to include a summary of your project, photos, and kind of any challenges you had, any funds that were not utilized, all need to be included in that final report. The quarterly reports are a little bit more flexible. They're essentially a way for us to check in, see if you're having any challenges, any way that we can help to make sure that your project is successful. If you are reaching any kind of impediments and are thinking that you might need to adjust your scope, the quarterly report is where we will discuss that. Also worth noting, especially if you're kind of familiar, this might be old news, but even if you have submitted a claim, we do still require the quarterly reports. So you would submit a claim if you were ready for that, as well as the quarterly reports. Claims are not required to be quarterly, but the reports are. Eligibility requirements. All of our grant programs have the same population eligibility requirement, and that is that all the projects or programs must exist in and benefit a city in Iowa with a population of 20,000 or fewer and not contiguous, sharing a common border, to a city with a population of 40,000 or greater. If it is a countywide project, it must be one of the 88 least populous counties in Iowa. Applicants for this one are very broad. It can include everything from an Iowa business, for-profit, colleges, universities, schools, local governments, nonprofits. It's very broad. Essentially, individuals cannot apply, but pretty much everyone else if they are based in Iowa. The eligibility requirements for the project need to identify the need. This will be in the application questions as well. And the need will be addressed by the implementation of a known successful solution. So that is kind of the crux of this program, is the implementation of a project or a program that has worked well elsewhere. That due diligence step is the applicant will need to indicate how they have done their research on this program, who they have met with, who they have talked with, who has successfully completed or is underway with the program that they are wanting to do. The local impact, the capacity of grant management. So this is essentially just demonstrating that the applicant entity itself has successfully done projects in the past and will be willing and able to manage this grant. And then feasibility of completion within the contract period. So the project must be completed, all the funds must be spent within that kind of year and a bit. Use of funds, again, it's very broad. Essentially, I would keep in mind that the use of funds must be directly related to the project. And this even includes personnel time, which is a little bit of a rarity with some state programs. So because this program could support hard infrastructure type projects as well as programming, the use of funds you will see reflects that as well, where you can have actual maybe events or programs or trainings that are the program itself. Or you could have construction if your project is the construction of an actual thing, hard infrastructure. Perhaps more relevant is the ineligible use of funds. So keep in mind that this program cannot fund kind of those ongoing costs. This needs to be something that is new to be implemented in your area. Also does not cover international domestic travel, cannot cover prizes or awards. That's something we come across a lot. That is not an eligible expense, either for match or the grant itself. And then you'll see these kind of ongoing costs, those again, not able to be utilized for this program. This is kind of a checklist. These are all included in the guidelines as well. If you're familiar with the guidelines, they are on our website. But just kind of to make sure that You have everything you need to check through that eligibility, which is what we will do internally before the review panels even look at applications when submitted. So we make sure that they're eligible entity, make sure that the request meets our requirements, the match meets our requirements. Everything must be submitted through iowagrants.gov. And also it must be submitted by the deadline, and anything after that cannot be accepted or considered. Another piece of information that's important to mention here, if the applicant is not the local government, either a city mayor or council for a city project, if it's a county project, that would be the Board of Supervisors. If that is not the applicant, then we like to have at least a letter of support and or just awareness from one of those entities to indicate that they know the project is happening. This is just to make sure that there is that collaboration between the local government entity and your initiative. They don't need to have any funding involved. It's really just an opportunity for us to be aware that they're aware. Finally, the primary applicant can only submit one application. However, they can be a partner in other applications. So just something to keep in mind, say for instance, a city is submitting an application, they can also be listed as kind of a partner role with another application as long as they are not the primary authorized applicant for multiple. And this is only for this program specifically. So if a city wants to submit a rural scale-up grant application as well as a rural housing assessment grant application, they are able to do that. All right, finally, we're going to get into the application and scoring rubric itself. I'm going to go kind of step by step through each of these so that you can see how the questions on the application correlate to the scoring rubric itself. So again, everything's in Iowa grants. The guidelines also include the scoring rubric and all of the kind of guidelines and points that I just pointed out. So definitely keep those guidelines on hand when you are filling out your application. They should really be helping to guide you through this process. The rubric is on a scale of 55 points, but that does not include the extra consideration points. This program has 3 opportunities for kind of bonus points, if you will. The first is if it is a project that has been endorsed by the Iowa Great Places Citizens Advisory Board. What that would mean is your community or region or area is designated an Iowa Great Place and the project has been endorsed by the advisory board. Also, projects that are located in a community of 5,000 or fewer received extra consideration. And then projects that scale up a former rural innovation grantee project. So this is not a requirement of the Rural Scale Up Grant Program. You do not have to be implementing a project that was funded by the Rural Innovation Grant. While that is the genesis of where this program came from, that we saw all these great innovation grants we wanted to spread across the state, we are not requiring that be the kind of project that you are applying for. However, if you are, you will receive some additional points for that. First is an unscored part. So this is the first question that is on the application. And I did include the character maximum on here. Please keep in mind, you do not have to go to the maximum. Sometimes it's better to kind of keep your responses succinct, but I wanted to include them on here just so you are aware. So the first question is the project description on the application. And really, this is just an opportunity for you to share what the project is. It should be relatively brief. I actually would encourage you to maybe not include the full 2,500 characters. This should just really kind of capsule in a nutshell what your project is. The first scored section is demonstrated need. So this is where you will have an opportunity to share what challenge your community is facing and how the proposed solution is going to address that challenge. We also want you to talk about why the timing is right, why you haven't addressed it in the past, or why it's a new problem, and why now is a good time. All of the points you'll see in the rubric, it's broken down by 5, 3, and 1. The panel, the review panel is guided to kind of give a range. So they can give between 1 and 5 points. And this is just to guide them on the type of response that would receive 5 points and the type of response that would receive just 1 point. And they can do any combination within that parameter. The second question is on due diligence. So this is getting to the part we talked about where the applicant is expected to have done some research, some background on the project or the program that they are wanting to implement. And here we really want them to talk about kind of who they talked to, what they learned from that experience, and why that kind of helped them to decide that, yes, this is the best path forward. Implementation. This is an opportunity for you to share how your project will be realized within the grant contract period. So you need to break down here a clear timeline of the steps that will be taken to complete your project. The more specific, the better. So if you can give kind of a range of months for construction or deadlines, that strengthens the application rather than just saying, oh, we will have completed the program by, June of 2023. Technically, that is an eligible response, but it would likely not score very well because it does not have enough information for us to know that the applicant understands all of the steps needed to accomplish this project and has broken down that they know they will be able to complete it in time within that contract period. Evaluation. So this one you need to look at in 2 different lenses. We want you to both look at qualitative and quantitative measurements evaluation. Understandably, some projects are easier to do that than others, but we encourage you to really think about how you will know if your project is a success. So how it is addressing the challenge, how you will be able to actually measure that. That can be through actual kind of number counts, that can be through engagements, that can be through surveys, but we want you to really think about kind of a variety of ways that you will be able to measure the success of your project. Partners. So of course, all projects require multiple partners. We want you to include both logistical and financial partners in this section. So a combination of people or entities or organizations that will be helping to move forward a successful project. But also, if you have any financial partners that are at the table as well, they should be listed here. They will also be included in your match documentation. But here will really help to show a full picture of all the partners on board. If you have any other kind of support pieces, add it here. We really like to see a very robust partnership in this section. So the more partners that you include, the stronger your score will be. This section is unscored. So while the character limits remain the same through all of here, I wouldn't necessarily stress out about kind of giving very long responses. We just want to make sure that you're kind of thinking about the overall public value of this, that you have in mind kind of who you're targeting, who the aim is for your project or your program, how you plan to share information about this project or program. We want you to have kind of thought through some of that. So again, it is unscored, but they are required responses. So you still need to answer something and just kind of give an overview of the goals of the program, especially if there's pieces that you have not been able to include in any of the other sections. This would be a good place for you to include it to make sure that the scoring panel is aware that you're kind of thinking holistically about how this program or project fits in to the environment of your community. The budget section is actually broken down into individual sections. So I listed here what the 4 sections are. You would include your requested amount So this is the grant request, maximum 20,000, minimum 5,000. The cash match amount. The minimum would be that half of whatever your requested amount is. However, for projects that are much larger, it might be a bigger number. Supplemental project costs, that is kind of everything else. So if you have any in-kind expenses, that could be included there. If you have any costs that are outside of the contract period, that would be included there. If you do not, then you can just put zero. You do not have to have a number in that supplemental project cost. And then the total might actually be, I should know this, but might actually be automatically populated. If it is not, it is the sum of all three of those sections. And budget local support. So the two questions that I put on here, source of matching funds and use of funds. So the source, you will be able to upload documentation of where you are sourcing those funds. So whether that is, if it's a city and they have a resolution stating that they are providing this amount of match, that would be included there. If it is from an organization, if there is even a letter from the president or CEO or someone saying that they have that match, that would count. You could also include budgets that show the line item for the match. We're fairly flexible on what can count there. And then the use of funds, you will have an opportunity to put line items for what the use is and how much of that is going to be used. I would balance the amount of detail with what you think is reasonable. So I say that to mean perhaps don't have just one line that says, hey, this project, and we're going to be using $30,000 on it. I would have at least a couple items on there. However, you do not need to get into the level of detail of, very individual building type steps that you would get maybe in a broken down budget quote for your project. You can upload that document if you do have quotes on construction, but you do not need to get necessarily into that level of detail with your use of funds within the application, if that makes sense. For both of these scoring pieces for the budget and budget local support, there are a couple of things to keep in mind. You will receive a higher score if you have multiple sources of applicant match and if you have local match. So we really, while it is eligible, if you have, say, a federal grant that is going to be your complete match for this project, that is allowed. However, we really like to see some skin in the game, if you will, from the local community, especially a combination of sources. So if you have, maybe the city's giving you a little bit, maybe there is a local foundation that is giving some funding. A variety is going to result in a higher score than if you just have a single, and especially a single non-local source. Media support material, this includes letters of support and then just general support material. So letters of support are exactly what they sound like. You can combine those into one PDF. We don't have a minimum or maximum requirement for that, but we do encourage you to submit letters of support. If you are not a government entity, we do have that one requirement where you do need to indicate that the local government, whether that is a city or county, is at least aware of the project. For support material, it varies wildly on what this could be, depending on the project. It could be anything from newspaper clippings, photos, press release, flyers, any combination of those things, just whatever is most relevant and you think would be useful for the review panel to see. And finally, the last section is on grantsmanship and case for support. This is essentially exactly what it sounds like. So if the application did a great job of kind of sharing the benefit of this project and their commitment to it, will result in a higher score. So this is an opportunity really for the review panel to consider the application as a whole, not kind of as those individual pieces, and be able to just provide that kind of extra scoring criteria. And that is the last of the scoring rubric. This is my information, and you are welcome to send me any emails, give me any calls as we go through this next month and a half of the application window. Happy to address anything that you might have in particular, but now we can move into, if anyone has any questions, you can either unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can drop it in the chat box, and I am happy to answer those now. While I wait and see if anyone has any questions, just a reminder, this will be recorded and is going to be posted on the website, the same pages where the guidelines are found on our IEDA website. So keep that in mind if you want to come back to this at any point. I will say all of this information is not new. All of this is either in the guidelines or in the application. Piece of information about iowagrants.gov. If you do not currently have an account, I would recommend creating one, even if you're not sure if you're going to apply, because it can take up to 3 days to have your account activated. And that is done by another entity within the state. So it's sometimes hard to get that moved any quicker if we are reaching the deadline. So please make sure that that is not a holdup if we're getting closer to that September 1st deadline, that your account is already made and you are in there and ready to submit. And that is true of any grants that are through iowagrants.gov. If you do have an account though, even if it was for a different program, that is the same one that you can use for these too.
Hi, Liesl, it's Nicole Behrens. I have a question.
Of course.
So I think I'd shared with you that in Grinnell, we're doing a community assessment, and it's a sort of like a renewal of an assessment that we did 10 years ago, kind of an update and renewal. And we used Dubuque's Heart and Soul. They've modified it since 10 years ago. And is it okay that, I know when you were talking about scaling up a former project, is it okay that it wasn't necessarily our project, but it's their project that we're going to use kind of in a new, take what we did 10 years ago and kind of do it in a bit of a new and different way, but sort of following their heart and soul?
Sure. Yes, I would just recommend that you indicate that you have been in conversations with, I don't know if that's Jason that you work with there at Dubuque, but that you've been talking with them, that
Okay.
you kind of done that work, but then yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And Kyle, yes, the review panel is absolutely made up of individuals from rural communities. It is primarily made up of our task force members from Empower Rural Iowa, and Empower Iowa is made up of 3 task forces, 22 people per task force. And of those 22, I'd say approximately 17 of them at least are living in rural communities. So of the panels, our panels are usually made up of 4 to 5 individuals. It depends on the number of applications we receive, but because we have so many panels, it's usually about 4 to 5 panelists. And I'd say at least 3, if not 4 of those 4 to 5 are from rural communities across the state. Thank you. Lee, this program is actually brand new, so we do not have any previously funded projects for this one. For the Rural Innovation Grants, the Rural Housing Assessment Grants, Rural Childcare Market Study Grants, and the Rural Leadership Grants, those are listed on the website. I believe they're listed under each of the individual programs, but for this one, this will be the first. So yes, next year they will be posted. Any other questions? I would recommend Dream Application Project. That's a good question, Kyle. I did include in the guidelines some great examples of projects that we have funded through the Rural Innovation Grant that were very successful and we would like to see spread. That's everything from a um, uh, grocery lockers is one that we were really excited about to help address food deserts. We have seen actually out of an organization in Dubuque, the rural innovation labs, kind of the rural incubators happening, and they are starting to spread across the state. We think that one's really great. Pocahontas County did a business accelerator program where they partnered with their local community college to give some training to new business people. We think that is a great model as well. So we've seen kind of a few different things that we think are really interesting and could serve other communities well. So if you haven't already, I would check out on the guidelines those kind of like examples. I think we listed 5 or 6 on there. And then kind of getting to the previous question, we do have all of the previous innovation grants recipients listed. So you could go check those out too to see what else has been funded. Any other questions? Well, again, thank you all so much for participating. This will be recorded and posted probably next week. It will be posted on the website. If you have questions in the meantime, you can either email me or the general rural at iowaeda.com email address, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.